I bought a $14,000 video game collection. Let's talk about it. All right, folks, so we have 4 huge 27-gallon totes to go through in this giant video game collection that I purchased. Now, before we start going over what is in these totes, and believe me, there's a lot of cool stuff to show you, let me kind of give you a little bit of background about how I found out about this collection. My good buddy, Saturn Steve, he knew that I was in the market to buy a collection, and he actually found an ad for a collection that was for sale a little bit outside of Atlanta. And he sent me a text message, sent me the link, told me about it, got me in touch with the guy selling the collection, and we went from there. Now, the seller wanted to kind of remain anonymous, which I totally respect and get, so you won't see or meet the seller. Before we start digging through all this awesome stuff that I bought, let's head on over to the seller's house and see how I picked it up and ask him a few questions about the collection.
It may not look like a lot, but there's a lot of, this is quality. This is a quality collection. A lot of quality games, consoles, a lot of everything's in really good condition. So I'm very happy about this. Now, our seller, I wanted to ask you, what made you decide to part ways with a lot of this really cool stuff?
Well, for me, I mean, I'm keeping a lot of what resonated with me as a kid. Most of it doesn't get played, so I figured you give it to somebody you can put it in the hands of the right people, and ultimately, you know, if I want to play something, you run an emulator nowadays.
That's true. That does make it easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now you're not selling your entire collection. You did decide to keep some stuff. What are some of the stuff that you decided to hang on to?
Basically all the Zeldas.
I'm sure that this is probably not going to be the end of you collecting. I'm sure you'll probably still collect or pick up a few things from time to time. So if you were to start recollecting stuff, what kind of stuff would you pick back up?
Yeah, so still collecting for me, complete in box. So right now I need a crystal box, Pokemon crystal box. I have the loose cart on my shelf. Yeah. And that box gets pretty pricey.
It does.
But really anything rare, yeah, I like to be able to preserve things and hold on to them for a bit and appreciate them.
Okay.
For me, you know, video games have been somewhat of an investment that you get to enjoy.
So what we're gonna do next, we're gonna take everything back to the house, back to the game room, and I'm gonna show you guys what's in this awesome collection, this awesome game lot. We're gonna kind of go through stuff, show the standouts, and we'll kind of talk about the rough value of everything and kind of what the plan is going forward with all this.
All right, folks, we're going to try to dig through this as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And, you know, I'm not going to go over every little thing that is in this collection, but I'm going to show you guys some notable stuff. A couple of Nintendo 64 controllers. We got a black and we have a red. And, of course, we've got the Duke, the giant Xbox controller, the Duke, that everybody knows about. GameCube to Game Boy Advance link cable, and we also have a Game Boy Advance link cable to link 2 Game Boy Advances together, so that's cool to see. And then we've got this third-party Super Nintendo controller. This tote has the majority of the video games in it, so we're going to be showing off a lot of really cool stuff here. Now, as you can see here, we have a pretty decent stack of PS2 games. Now, the notable games here in this stack are going to be Magna Carta and Capcom versus SNK 2. Those are going to be our notable games. And there's also a couple of really cool PlayStation 2 demo discs here. Now, one thing I do want to mention before we go further is pretty much all of the games in this collection are in fantastic condition. Pretty much everything in this collection is in fantastic condition, which is always nice when you're buying a collection or a game lot. All right, next up, folks, we've got some Xbox and Xbox 360 games. Now, there's nothing crazy notable here, but what we do have, as you can see here, is NCAA Football 14, which is the very expensive NCAA football game. Now, next up, we have got a decent stack of GameCube games here. So the notable games here obviously are going to be Pikmin and Luigi's Mansion, but we also have a copy of Mario Kart Double Dash loose with the manual, but I will be keeping Luigi's Mansion. It is complete. I will be adding that to the GameCube collection. We also have a zipper bag full of loose discs. Now, there's not really anything crazy. There's some loose GameCube games here. There's a few decent games here. We've got a loose copy of Luigi's Mansion, a loose copy of Sonic Adventure Battle 2. We have a Nintendo DS Lite, and it is in really good condition and works perfect. And we have a Wii game, The Conduit 2, which I actually don't have, but it doesn't have a manual, so I'm gonna pass on that. And there is a giant box full of manuals here for NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo. So one of the notable manuals here, which actually really shocked me, is this manual for Shaq Fu for the Game Boy. That is a pretty pricey one. The most expensive manual in this box is this manual for Dot Hack Quarantine. It's about $100 manual, and it is minty. All right, there are a ton of Super Nintendo games here that actually have the manual with them. Yoshi's Island, Doom with the manual, Super Mario World with the manual, Star Fox with the manual, Wolf Child with the manual, Street Fighter 2 with the manual, Super Bomberman with the manual, F-Zero with the manual. We have Raid and Trad with the manual, and we have 2 Super Game Boys with the manuals. And we have several NES games in here, a lot of which have the manuals. A couple of Game Boy games. We've got Pokemon Red, we've got Tetris, and Donkey Kong. Shockingly, there are also a couple of Sega Master System games in here, which is something you don't really see very often. So we got Time Soldiers, and we also have Astro Warrior. We also have Batman Forever and Star Trek The Next Generation on the Sega Genesis complete in box. There are a ton of PlayStation 1 games in here. And there's also a couple of cool little PS1 demo discs here. We got Croc 2 demo disc, and then also we got a demo disc for Shadow Madness and Jade Cocoon. One PSP game being Ape Escape on the Loose. We have a couple of Dreamcast games here. We've got Trick Style, Air Force Delta, and Tokyo Extreme Racer 2, as well as Shenmue. And shockingly, we've got a couple of TurboGrafx 16 games. We've got Double Dungeons and Keith Courage in Alpha Zones. We've got some empty DS cases with manuals, and then we've got a couple of 3DS games that are complete in box, being Super Mario 3D Land and Mario Kart 7. Now, as you can see here, there's a ton of loose NES, Super Nintendo games, a couple of loose Sega Genesis games. We got Mario Kart 64, Super Mario 64, and GoldenEye. And we have a single Japanese Super Famicom game, and that is Star Fox. Check this out, folks. Look at this. This is insane. We've got a stack of Mega Man NES games here. Now, Super Nintendo games, on the other hand, we do have quite a few notable Super Nintendo games to talk about here, like Biker Mice from Mars, Castlevania 4. And then on the handheld gaming front, there are definitely some notable titles in here to mention. We've got a copy of Pokemon Gold. We got a copy of Pokemon Red. We got a copy of Pokemon Silver. And then we've got a loose PlayStation Vita game called Demon Gaze 2 that is worth about $60 loose. All right, there's not a whole lot in this box, so we should be able to move through this one relatively quickly. As you can see, we have a Xbox 360 Arcade Edition. We've got a box full of Intellivision, Atari, Commodore 64 manuals. We also have a Super Nintendo. As you can see here, we got Super Nintendo with the hookups and one controller, so that's always cool to see. The notable thing in this box, and also one of the most expensive things in this lot, is this complete in box Platinum GameCube. Look at that box. This box is in absolutely fantastic condition. Now, one of the cool things about this particular collection is there are a metric crap ton of video game magazines and players guides, the majority of which are Nintendo Power magazines. As a matter of fact, there are about 113 issues of Nintendo Power here, and some really good ones. Some things that I thought were pretty cool, just to show you guys real quick. You know, we've got stuff like the Top Secret Nintendo Players Guide, the Game NES Atlas Nintendo Players Guide, the Super NES Nintendo Players Guide, Super Game Boy Guide, and then of course the Game Boy Nintendo Players Guide, Mario Mania Players Guide, the Mario Paint Player's Guide, GoldenEye 007, Star Fox 64, Super Mario 64, and Pokemon Crystal version. Now, these are really cool. I never even knew these existed. These are from, obviously, Nintendo Power, but they're called Pokemon Power, and there's 6 issues of these. Now, one of the coolest things in here in this entire lot of Nintendo Power magazines, of course, I've never actually held one of these in person before, and that is the 2nd issue of Nintendo Power. Okay, we are down to the final tote of this collection. Now, you guys are not going to believe some of the stuff that's in this tote. We have a Super Nintendo multi-tap. Now, this is a third-party multi-tap. I've never actually seen this one before, so that's pretty cool to see. Super Nintendo mouse pad, and the manual for it. We have a Super Nintendo Super Scope with all of the attachments, as well as the manuals and the Super Scope 6 video game on the Super Nintendo. Alrighty, now let's get to some pretty cool stuff here. Now, in this box, we have some boxed retro games. However, these are box only. They don't actually have the games in them. Some of them have the manuals. All right, folks, the moment you've all been waiting for. This is the grand finale. I wanted to save the best for last, and this is easily my favorite portion of this game collection. And so what we're about to show here are a bunch of complete in box NES, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo 64 games. Dragon Warrior, Micro Machines, the Aladdin Compact Cartridge, Super Mario Bros. 3, Dr. Mario, Mega Man 3, Back to the Future 2 and 3, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers on the NES, Tetris, The Goonies 2. We have a complete in box copy of Marble Madness. Absolutely beautiful, super clean complete in box copy of Super Mario Kart, complete in box Super Mario All-Stars, Battletoads in Battle Maniacs. This is one of the most expensive items in this collection. Yoshi's Safari. We've got a complete in box copy of Super Star Wars Return of the Jedi, by far the most expensive item in this entire collection. And that is a really good condition complete in box copy of Mega Man on the NES. It simply has a tear right here. Other than that, it is in phenomenal condition, and that sucker right there is worth about $550 to $600. All right, folks, so let's break down some of the final numbers. But before I do that, I do want to say a special thank you to the seller. This is like the best possible deal you can get as a collector or a reseller or both. And that is when you find somebody selling a collection and you have a mutual understanding. So me and the seller, we had a mutual understanding. Seller knew what everything was worth, well aware of the full value of everything. I knew what everything was worth. Seller knew that I intended to resell a lot of this stuff. So we had a mutual understanding. He just didn't want to deal with individually selling everything. The final numbers here for the collection, the total estimated rough price charting value of everything is $13,000. The rough estimated eBay value, which is going to be basically market value, is around $14,500. There's over 500 items in the lot. The 5 most expensive things in this collection are the Mega Man 1 complete in box on the NES at around $600, the Battletoads Battle Maniacs complete in box for around $300, the Platinum GameCube complete in box for around $275, Metroid 2 Return of Samus Game Boy box and manual only at around $160, and lastly the Super Mario RPG Player's Guide at around $150. So a lot of this inventory is going to end up at Really Rad Weekend in November, because I will be vending at Really Rad Weekend in November in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. I'll leave a link to that convention down below if you want to check it out. And if you want to come by and buy some of the stuff you saw in this video, you'll probably get a good deal. So I hope to see you there.